Now, we left off talking about height. And remember, the big thing is to make sure that when you're conceptualizing, you stop at the definition. So height is, you can talk about it different ways, but in terms of a person, it's perfectly fine to say the distance from the bottom of someone's feet to the top of their head. But you don't say whether that height is measured in inches or meters or centimeters or any of that. You just stop. Because measurement itself is operationalization. So let's conceptualize now what is a father. And again, we just want the definition. What is a father? Seems like an easy question, but remember, it is what is a father in the context of a theory about the relationship between the height of a father and the height of a son. Let's take 30 more seconds on that. Some of you are still typing. I want to make sure you've got time for that. All right, so we had lots of answers, and they kind of fall into two categories. Lots of students say a man who takes care of a child, a man who is the parent of a child. Those don't go quite far enough because it allows for the possibility that maybe I'm a stepfather, or maybe I've adopted a child and that child grows up to be 7 feet tall. Right? Other than feeding that child and taking them to the doctor when they're sick and make sure that everything's going along fine, am I responsible for that child's height? No, because I had absolutely nothing to do with that child's genetics. So what we need to be careful of, and this is very specific, and there's two ways of doing it. There's the very specific, or say the biological father of a child, which several of you also said. And that's why conceptualization matters. It matters for the specific type of question. If we just want to know about maybe the social and emotional development of a child, right? One of the questions we might ask is, do they have a steady father figure in their life? In that case, it doesn't matter if it's a stepfather, an adopted father. It just matters that somebody is doing that job. But in this case, it was a very specific job, and that was to be the biological parent. So, the second half of this, what is a son? There we go. Okay. See if we get, well, we had it. Now we lost it again.
And again.
All right. Let's see if we can get back. There we go. Okay. So yeah, the correct answer here is something that tells us it's the biological male offspring of a father. Right? And in this case, the specifics are important because some people do not identify according to the sex they were born as, so male or female. We'll do more on gender later, but for now, what we would need for this is the presence of an X and a Y chromosome. So nicely done. Now, for operationalization. How do we observe or measure height? I will tell you, fourth hour kind of got carried away with this in a little respect. So don't go nuts. This does not need to be a complicated answer. You don't need to measure people with lasers. You don't need to run them through a mass spectrometer, gas what is it? What are those again? Gas chromatograph. There we go. You don't need that. That would also kill them. So don't do that. Right? Just keep it simple.
All right.
Oh, that's all right, Sean. Okay. Oh, we can get that problem again. Okay. Not want to comply. Okay. It can be as simple as feet in inches. Right? And in that case, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Be nice.
If Oscar would do a study and measure people in feet and inches, and Rod did a study where he measured people in centimeters, we just convert those, and that would be fine. So in this case, we just need to know our unit of measure. And right, we might want to be specific here in terms of our observation, because if we included people's hair, that could mess with things. And, happened to be at the Rolling Hills Library on Dr. Seuss's birthday, and one of the library staff had piled their hair up on their head like Cindy Lou Who and had made themselves get 10 to 12 inches taller, right? That's a problem if we're measuring height. I mean, if I wanted to cheat, I could do the same thing and make myself 6 feet tall. But would I really be 6 foot tall? No. Right? So for that, it's nice to have the space between a person's feet and the top of their head, or the distance between those 2 points, and the unit of measure. And if now some of you have an image of me trying to impersonate Cindy Lou Who, I'm very sorry for that. Like I'm trying to get that out of my own head. Wish me luck. Okay. And for operationalizing this variable, how would we observe and measure the father-son family or familial connection? Okay. I'm going to highlight here 3 answers that are kind of representative of what I got from the class as a whole. So one is an answer thinking about the social father-son bond. In that case, though, do we want to know like how close the father and son are socially, or do we want to know that biological connection? Right, so biological. And in this, we've got 2 kinds of ways. This one's more open-ended. Start with the more closed-ended one. All right, so genetic testing. And we could do that. If, Javier, you're no longer a Victorian explorer. I don't know if you consider that a good thing or not. Now you're a modern 21st century scientific researcher. And you're studying the relationship between the height of a father and the height of a son. You could ask people to provide genetic samples. Do you think a lot of people would be a little reluctant to give you DNA samples? What? Some. I realize it's different for different people, but some people would be pretty cagey about sharing a DNA sample because it could be used against you. And I'm bringing this up partly because you guys should be careful with some of this stuff. There's a lot of gray area in terms of how your genetic information can be shared and used. And if it's out there, and if insurance companies should get a hold of it, and let's see, Kevin maybe provides a genetic sample, and a life insurance company gets a hold of it, and they find something in your DNA that suggests like there are lots of diseases that are likely to affect you and reduce your lifespan, right? They're not going to issue you a policy, or they're going to charge you, right, a huge premium because they know you're really risky. Same thing with health insurance, right? So be careful with these. Now for the more open-ended one. Just find out if they're biologically related. Without a DNA test, how could we figure that out? Yeah, you just ask them. Would somebody maybe lie to you? Maybe. When I was in elementary school, there was a kid in my class that didn't find out until 6th grade that his dad wasn't really his dad. That was a rough day in school. Right? Really rough for that kid. You could imagine for something like that somebody might be not even honest with their own child. But we ask because that's the least invasive. Also, DNA testing is expensive. So we ask, and we just hope that we get good information, and most of the time we will get good, honest information. All right, and now for what nerds like me call the fun part, interpreting data. We've got a scatter plot here. Each one of those dots represents where a father's height and a son's height match up. And then we've got a trend line or regression line that shows us the general relationship between the data, between our 2 variables. And on the x-axis here, we've got our independent variable, father's height. Y-axis has son's height. And these are measurements in inches, right? So they tell us that it's nice. So looking at this correlation, the relationship between these 2 variables, how they change together. Is this a positive or negative correlation? I'm going to give us 30 seconds. I don't think we're going to need terribly much time. We probably don't even need the full 30 seconds. Kind of. I don't. As tricky as Pear Deck is going to be, I don't want to do anything that could anger the pair. Oh, you can zoom in. Yeah, you can do that. But yes, Emma's right. Never anger the pair.
Of the deck of pair.
There you go.
I probably angered it.
And you guys were unanimous on positive. And it is a positive correlation. As father's height goes up, son's height goes up. No, that's well, some of that's me and some of that's Pear Deck. Okay. Same graph, different question. Is the correlation between the height of fathers and the height of sons strong or weak? Do the changes in one variable closely match changes in the other? Right? Or is there not much of a connection between the independent variable and the dependent variable? Now, I've only given you two options. You may not think those options allow you to accurately answer the question, but just pick, in that case, the lesser of two evils. I don't have everybody yet. All right, and we were almost unanimous that it is a strong correlation.
Why does the blue bar not go all the way to the bottom?
So we still had some people that didn't answer.
I know one of them was on the bottom, but
It is what I would interpret, especially given only those two choices, as a strong correlation. I think even if I'd given you the choice of a moderate correlation, it really would still be a strong correlation. Really, a perfect correlation would be a 45-degree angle starting in this corner and carving the box of our graph into two identical triangles. That would be perfect correlation. We don't have that. There is a lot of scatter here, so I can understand why you guys would have some doubts about this. There's a father, let's see, it's about 6'2" that has a son that is about 5'7". So there are clearly some mismatches, right? And there's somebody, well, actually shorter than me, 5'3", who has a son that is 6'2". Right? So there are some mismatches, but in general, right, and this is why we have a trend line. That trend line moves steadily up on the dependent variable as the independent variable gets bigger. Yeah, well, and that, without turning this into a stats class, for the sake of some of us who've already suffered through stats today or will suffer through it later today, that's why it's called regression to the mean. And the law of large numbers kind of lets us find these patterns. And that's all I'll say about that for the sake of some of our sanity. Yes, Emma.
Okay, so if you look at a graph like this and the line tilts this way, does that automatically make it positive?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, even if it's very weak, right,
Yeah,
it's still positive. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
in math, if it goes this way, it's positive.
Right. If they move up together, yeah, as one gets taller, you just need to you can almost always do it purely just visually off of what you see here, but sometimes be careful, make sure that the numbers are getting bigger, both as we go from left to right and from bottom to top, because sometimes it's not that case. All right. Here you do have three choices. What do you think? How well does the evidence support our hypothesis? Choose your option.
sorry.
That's all right, Sean. Okay, and almost all of you are here in the middle. Right, good. Father's height is a strong predictor of son's height. And it is. Right? It's not perfect. If it were perfect, we would have that 45-degree angle. All of the dots would perfectly follow that 45-degree angle. But it's also not poor. Right? It is clearly a strong predictor of son's height. What would be the best next step in testing our theory or improving our theory? Now, you don't have to go crazy here, just one step. The theory that genetics causes height. Remember, we just took from a theory one hypothesis to test it. So one relationship we expected to see between two variables.
Comparison spelled pretty badly, but
Okay, and again, I'm going to highlight some answers. There were lots that were likely, so don't feel left out if you said the same thing, but you're not up here. So one, we could just do a pure replication. Right? We could study a different subset of people. Maybe that graph is only based on people living in the United States. So we might want to do this test on, say, a Chinese population or a population from Namibia. Who knows? So, yeah, we might get something different. So replication could be a good next step. And here, right, Javier, I don't usually identify, but in this case, it's a good thing. And you were our imaginary researcher. In this case, Javier might want to do a more focused study and seek out volunteers who would submit themselves to genetic testing so that we could find out, like, do fathers regularly, do their genetics regularly outweigh other genetics, like the mother's genetics in determining height? So we can look at these things. Because, I don't know, have any of you done any of those like Ancestry or 23andMe genetic tests? Okay, so some of you have. And so what you find out, I mean, especially if like your dad did it and maybe your dad's sibling did it, like their ethnicity, according to genetics, may be very different. Right? And I suspect that's what we would find if my brother-in-law and my wife were to get genetically tested. I think he would show up very much more as having inherited the Irish side of the family, whereas hers would be much more the Swiss Germans. So yeah, we could do that, right? Javir's right. We could also add other variables to see what's going on. Right? So adding in the mother's height. Some students in fourth hour suggested we could look at the living conditions of the child because certainly that might matter. Right? Imagine that we've got another father coming out of like Northeast Africa, like Manute Bol. Does that reference even matter, Manute Bol? Okay, so Porter 1 gets it. I'll take that as a win. Most of my references to anything involving sports or pop culture always fall flat, so Porter, this is a good day for me. Manute Bol was 7'6", I believe. I think, because he also played for the Philadelphia 76ers, so it made it easy to remember as a kid. Very tall. But imagine that a man just like Manute Bol was escaping from a civil war or a famine in Northeast Africa, and his child had been malnourished, maybe in their trek out of Northeast Africa had contracted malaria and their body had to fight off that parasitic infection. There's a good chance that son is not going to be as tall, right? That his growth would have been stunted. So yeah, adding in other variables can certainly help. 7'3"? Okay. Does his son play professional basketball? Okay. I think Manute Bol died, didn't he? Yeah. I mean, people that tall do not tend to live all that long.
Do you have gigantism or something?
No. Like he's not like Andre the Giant. The guy was like really tall and spindly, right? Very thin. But it's just kind of hard being that tall. Okay. At this point, you can go ahead and turn in the notes. I did push back that deadline, of course, for people who might not be here today so they can watch the recording of it later and finish. But you guys might as well go ahead and turn this in. We don't have any notes to add. It was good.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all right. Okay.
Could it say decent?
Yeah. once you've done that, right, we do have an exit slip, and I know there's only 3 minutes before lunch. Don't throw rocks at me just yet. I suspected we'd run short on time, but I didn't want to do an exit slip anyway. So this is not going to be due also until the start of school on Monday. You can take it 2 times. Instead of having one chunk of time in which to take it twice, you get 8 minutes for each attempt. And I'm only going to keep the higher of your 2 scores. Right? If you want to do one in the next couple of minutes, you can, but you can also wait and do them during seminar or after school, your choice. Just don't forget to do it. That's the big thing.
Don't forget to submit the notes like I do sometimes.
Yep, that's why I'm reminding you now that we're finished. No, just go ahead and submit them now. There's no bonus points for submitting them exactly on time.
That'd be interesting.